All right, Wargaming enthusiasts, we've got an incoming hobby question here. Fritz, what is filler terrain? That's what we're going to explore. That's what we're going to ask. And of course, in the comments, we'll look for a couple of examples. So Wargaming being a visual game with miniatures. I mean, we could go old school, Avalon Hill. We've got the hexes. We've got the counters with little boxes. Everything is played on a map. That's tactical. But in terms of Battletech as an example, and this is true again of Warhammer 40,000 or Chain of Command, they're the visuals. I want to push around little toys. I want to, with the terrain and the miniatures and the battlefield effects, these moments in the game where you step back and it's almost like you're stepping out of space and time, like you are really there in the battle. So I try my best with painted miniatures and painted terrain and themed terrain. So this idea, even with the hex maps, we could say the hex maps don't have terrain. And we're not talking about hybrid hex maps. Sometimes what you see are the hex maps where the woods are actually little tokens mounted on a hex that get placed there. And when a mech moves in there, you take the terrain away that it occupies. Put aside hybrid maps, classic old school hex map, that they're detailed. They're in color. They look great. They're printed. So there is this idea of terrain on that. But as a traditional wargaming table, we have the terrain, of course, tactically, high ground, not high ground, cover, not cover, mission objectives. Putting all that aside, just on the visuals, we're trying to create a simulation. This leads into filler terrain. Often what we'll see is you have a gaming table and you have terrain that's mounted on a base or a frame. And the idea is, so this way it has structure and you can pick it up and move it. You place down these key terrain pieces. So I might put down a couple of buildings. I put down a forest. I put down a processing plant. They are literally a model similar to your miniatures. And they won't often be fixed because this way you can have a nice box of terrain, City Fight, City Tech, move it around, different maps at different times. After you've set up your map, filler terrain is literally little bits and pieces that you could put out or even sprinkle on the board to break up the gaps where the terrain meets and to fill in these pieces to make it look more organic. Here's a great example. If I put out two forests and I have some forest terrain that's mounted on a round base, it's got some rocks, it's got some trees, and I put two of those down, we'll have a little bit of loose shrubbery or loosely painted foam or some of that designer craft moss. Sprinkle some of that in between the two. Sprinkle out some of that on the table. It's purely visual. When we play, it's such a small amount scaled with the mechs and size. We play that. It doesn't exist, essentially. No cover is gained. It's just there for the visuals. If we're in that city fight, city tech, some lights, some stop signs, some signage, maybe little bits and piles of rubble that you might sprinkle out. I have a bunch of little scaled size hover cars that I'll put next to the buildings to fill it in. Tactically, they count for nothing. It's as if they are invisible. You are literally scattering this out through the board to help make it a little bit more organic, to help fill in the pieces so it doesn't look like you just threw down some buildings, but it fills in. And I find just literally having a little box of this scatter terrain, and after everything's set up, just a little bit of window dressing, sprinkle it out, put it out, model it out. It really, really adds to that visual when, not only when you're playing, but when you step back, you're like, wow, this is a battlefield.